Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our breakout session, working side by side, government relations' role in northern communities. I am Gerald Roy, Municipalities of Saskatchewan's Regional Director and Councillor for the Northern Village of Isle Cross. Please note the session is being recorded and will be available for the next 30 days on the virtual convention platform. We will be taking questions at the end of this presentation, so if you have questions, be sure to enter them in the chat box under the Q&A tab. We will not be taking live questions during the session. Sessions at convention are made possible by generous sponsors. It is my pleasure to introduce our session sponsors, Canada Life and Morneau Shepell.
Hello, everyone, and greetings from Canada Life. My name is Dan Bowen, and I've had the pleasure of working with the municipalities of Saskatchewan on your benefit plan for the last 10 years. As an essential service during the pandemic, we at Canada Life know that we play a vital role in the physical and financial well-being of your employees. Your employees are integral to the continued functioning of our towns and cities, and we are proud to support them when they need our services. For life as you know it, an employee can have a drug claim, a dental appointment, or even something more severe like a disability. Canada Life will be there to meet your employees' needs. We are happy to co-sponsor this session at your convention with our partner Morneau Shepell, and I pass along the greeting to Kaylee Stewart.
Thanks, Dan. Hello, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Kaylee Stewart, and I've been working with the municipalities of Saskatchewan on their Employee and Family Assistance Program, otherwise known as the EFAP, for the past 5 years. If you're not familiar with the EFAP, it is a program that many of the municipalities have access to that provides confidential mental health, wellness, and overall well-being support, which is now more important than ever. In fact, Morneau Shepell has found that since April of 2020, the general psychological health and safety of Canadians has steadily declined. So having access to programs like the EFAP is really imperative to ensuring that employees and their families have resources to take care of themselves. We're happy to co-sponsor this session with our partners at Canada Life and are pleased to attend the conference virtually with you all. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Canada Life and Morneau Shepell, for making today's session possible. When we plan events for you, we try to tailor the topics and speakers to your needs. The full bios for our speakers today are available on our convention platform. There you can see the work our presenters have put into gaining the knowledge they are going to share with you here today. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Brad Henry, Executive Director of Northern Municipal Services, and Matt Healy, CEO of New North Saskatchewan Association of Northern Community Services. Thank you both for joining us today. I will now turn the virtual floor over to Brad.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Gerald. Let's see. Let's get the slides up, I guess, and there we go. All right, well, thanks, everyone. I'm the Executive Director of Northern Municipal Services. My name is Brad Henry, and I work out of L'Orange, where most of our office is based. Let's see, I think these are Matt's slides, so I don't want to get you guys too into what he's going to talk about. So let's get my slides up on the screen here, if you guys don't mind. So I'll just speak a little bit about what the ministry does right now while we get this switched around. Great, thank you. The ministry is responsible for municipal relations, public safety, and First Nations, Métis, and Northern Affairs, and the Provincial Capital Commission. The ministry engages a diverse range of partners and stakeholders to plan for and respond to opportunities and challenges for growth, provide leadership direction with respect to integrated public services, and ultimately support responsible governments and the communities that they work with. To speak loosely, about it, I sort of say often that the Ministry of Government Relations is kind of acts as the sticky middle of government. At the end of the day, we have a lot of responsibilities to support and assist frontline entities, and really provide a lot of the internal support for collaboration internal to government. A lot of what we do is behind the scenes because really we're supporting the frontline entities. Those are municipalities, those are First Nations, those are a lot of the other frontline executive government agencies. And that's where I think a lot of the most essential work that we do is to ultimately support you guys. This is just a snapshot of the legislation that we are responsible for, just to sort of speak to that broad range of responsibilities I'd mentioned. I think it's funny, this isn't actually all of the legislation. This is just the most important stuff. There's a lot more detail under the hood, like I say, behind what government relations does and the services we provide. Maybe I'll take this opportunity to introduce my coworker, Eli. She joined me and my family in 2015 during the 2015 wildfires. And she was sort of one of the refugees from that, and we took her in and have been best buddies ever since. Let's see. So Northern Municipal Services in particular, we, as per our name, have significant responsibilities with respect to serving and assisting Northern municipalities. We kind of wear two main hats. One of those is that we are ourselves a municipality. The Northern Saskatchewan Administration District is one big municipality. So everything in the north that isn't a First Nation, provincial park, or incorporated municipality is served by the Ministry of Government Relations as the mayor and council. I'm delegated the responsibilities of administration, which is fulfilled by my staff, and so ultimately we are the partner and neighbor of every single municipality and First Nation in Saskatchewan. We take that very seriously. On the executive government side of things, we also deliver municipal advisory services, community and land use planning, official community plans, zoning bylaws. We assist with a lot of that kind of work and related bylaws. We deliver municipal grants in the north, Northern Municipal Revenue Sharing. We also deliver a Northern Capital Grants program. We do significant amounts of investments in Northern municipal water and sewer infrastructure. And ultimately, a lot of that is satisfied through through a tool that we have, which is pretty special, the Northern Municipal Trust Account. It's a special account of government's general revenue fund, but it's directed towards delivering the municipal administration aspects of the district as a municipality, as well as the grant funding vehicle that I'd spoken to earlier. Now, there have been some recent changes to the legislation, and I'd just like to speak to some of that in detail. So the Ministry of Government Relations was in 2018-19 directed to complete a review of the Municipal Revenue Sharing Grant Program. A lot of you assisted in that process, and I just wanted to just pause and say thank you for that. That was very critical to informing the outcomes of that review, and it definitely wouldn't have been anywhere near what we see today otherwise. So the main objective of that review was ultimately to give recommendations to government on how MRS grants could encourage effective local governance, something that's important to all of us. Through this process, the ministry implemented annual eligibility requirements for municipalities to receive unconditional municipal revenue sharing grants. Again, that's pretty important. I don't know of many other programs to deliver funding, as much funding to municipalities in Canada on an unconditional basis. That's a pretty special aspect, is that municipalities are really free to use those funds to direct them towards their priorities. Now, the eligibility requirement process, basically around November 15th each year, each municipality is asked to complete a declaration to determine which eligibility requirements they are compliant with. And that online form must be completed and submitted back to the ministry by January 31st. So it's a pretty straightforward process, but it does require a resolution of council confirming that the municipality meets all requirements, or if not, doesn't. So ultimately, there's 6 eligibility requirements. Each municipality is required, and this is not just in the north. This is each municipality in Saskatchewan is required annually to submit audited financial statements to the ministry. That's not a new requirement, but it is being an eligibility requirement for municipalities. Municipal revenue sharing is new. They have to submit the public reporting on municipal waterworks to the ministry annually. They have to ensure that their education property taxes are in good standing regarding the reporting and remittance of funds. They have to adopt a council procedures bylaw, adopt an employee code of conduct, and annually file public disclosure statements from all members of council. Now, again, these aren't new requirements. These have all been in place for a while now. What's new is that they are becoming directly related to eligibility for municipal revenue sharing. So municipalities who do not submit the ministry's declaration of eligibility form by January 31st may see their municipal revenue sharing grants withheld. In addition, municipalities who are not in compliance with one or more eligibility requirements may see their MRS grant withheld until compliance is achieved. That's important, and I just want to point out that this is one distinction in terms of how it's enforced in the south versus how it's enforced in the north. At the moment, the only requirement that municipalities have to meet in the north is to submit that declaration. Municipalities who don't submit that declaration simply won't be getting their revenue sharing until that's submitted. It's a pretty low hanging fruit. The bar is not very high in that case, because we know that there's a lot of municipalities that are really struggling to with a lot of the challenges, not in the least related to COVID. And we want to make sure that that this isn't really intended to be a way to take anything from the municipal sector. If anything, it's intended to enhance the municipal sector. Now, I also just want to point out that in the south, it's a little bit different. The municipal eligibility requirements for municipal revenue sharing are in full force. And so for southern municipalities, if they're not eligible with any of the compliance requirements, they get their entire revenue sharing grant withheld until compliance is achieved. So just one point at which there's a difference in the south, not in terms of the policy, but how it's implemented. If a municipality doesn't meet all those steps, it's their responsibility to do what's necessary to meet those steps. Once we're informed that they meet their requirements, any previously withheld municipal revenue sharing grant amounts that were previously withheld due to eligibility requirements would be released at that point. Another big change is that the Northern Municipalities Act was recently amended to require that all municipalities appoint a qualified administrator. Basically, in short, every municipality that doesn't have a qualified administrator needs to get one. Now, that's not to say that your current administration isn't suitable. At the end of the day, each municipality that doesn't have a qualified administrator should be trying to acquire one or trying to develop one. The program is delivered through the University of Regina, and it's called the Local Government Administration Program. It's a certificate program that they offer, and it's offered online. And essentially, once a municipality is enrolled, they should be contacting the Municipal Administrators Association of Saskatchewan to apply for conditional certification. At that point, you meet that requirement. And ultimately, as long as you're following through with the completion of that program, there really shouldn't be any issues. So, yeah, that's a new change in the legislation. That's about it for me in my presentation.
I guess we'll go over to Matt Healy's presentation now. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Sean, for putting that up. So thanks, Brad, for that. So I guess in addressing the theme, I'm going to, I guess, take a slightly broader look than just looking at the eligibility requirements that Brad has kind of detailed just now. So in my view, and actually, I should just mention that what you're going to hear from me is very much my perspective. New North doesn't really have, that I know of anyway, a policy, I guess, on what government's role should be in any particular sense. From time to time, of course, we'll support or object to different things that government does, but just a general, kind of overview. We don't really have a perspective. So what you're going to be hearing is very much a personal observations, I suppose, based on 8 or 9 years of looking at this. I'm also just going to confine my remarks to talking about municipalities, even though I guess it mentions communities there. There are communities in the north that aren't municipalities. So we're really just going to be talking about the role of government relations with respect to municipalities. And there are two kind of main sort of ways I'm going to look at this. One through the regulatory, and then through the funding sort of pieces, and then talk a little bit about the implications of government's approaches to both of those different things. So overall, I would, if I was to kind of summarize what I'm about to say, it is that when looking at the role of government in the North, we always have to ask ourselves, whether their policies or strategies or approaches are there to serve the needs of the communities, or are they there to serve the needs of the of government, really? So sometimes it seems to be that these things are more about government responding to pressure on government. And in some ways, I think the eligibility requirements are a reflection of that. And sometimes, clearly, this is for the benefit of the municipality. So I'm just going to jump right in here to just talk about the regulatory or oversight role. The reason I'm starting here is because I think it's really important that we understand what government does and does not do, and the expectations of, I think, newly elected is that government has quite a lot of oversight of municipalities and quite a lot of control. And I also think the public expects that as well. But I don't really feel that's the case. So even though government creates a framework, through legislation, and Northern Municipalities Act, I guess, is the main one here. The legislation is, I guess, what they call permissive. It just provides authority for municipalities to do certain things, to undertake certain activities. But government doesn't really police it so much. And we've found that in the last few years, I guess, when we see something happening and then kind of question, Brad's office about, what they may be doing about that particular thing, and response usually is, I'm not going to do anything about it. So the other thing to remember about the Municipalities Act, or Northern Act, is that it's increasingly being shaped by municipalities themselves. There's, especially in the Northern Act, there's a few pieces of it where Northern leaders, the mayors over the years, have suggested changes that actually would seem to sort of increase a kind of oversight in some ways, or decrease authority, that have actually come from municipalities themselves. So it's not always about government saying, we want this to happen. Quite often you will see some of the changes, some of the initiatives, some of the regulation coming out of the municipal sector as well. So the Northern Act came along in the 1980s. It really hasn't changed all that much except in size. Back in the 1980s, when a lot of the northern municipalities were incorporated, there was I guess a kind of a plan to, or some thought anyway, towards creating a different kind of structure in the north, perhaps, regional administration or regional governance models were contemplated, but really nothing happened. The structure of municipal government in the north in the 80s pretty much the same as it is today, which I think is kind of a reflection of the municipal structure in Saskatchewan as a whole, which really hasn't changed in about 100 years. My overall view of government in terms of the oversight or the regulatory function is it's pretty hands-off. So a framework is created, the eligibility requirements being a pretty good example of that, and then municipalities are sort of asked to meet that. So even though some of you may be thinking, well, we're under government's thumb, we can't do this, we can't do that, as compared to other jurisdictions, I do feel that municipalities in Saskatchewan do have a lot of freedom and do get away with quite a lot, actually. So perhaps that's just a personal perspective. I don't work in the sector as such. Municipalities, I think, are given a lot of latitude. And that I think that partly just comes from the fact that there's so many of them in the province, and this attitude kind of extends to the north as well. But it also extends from an overall, strategy or approach, policy environment, if you will, where municipal autonomy is really stressed or emphasized. And so, municipalities are given quite a lot of scope to operate, according to their own needs, I think. The minister does have fairly substantial powers in the legislation. Very, very rare to see those powers being used. I can't even think of, more than half a dozen examples over the last 8 or so years. Partly, I think it's because it's quite risky. I think government is probably concerned about setting precedents, but this, in some ways, this goes against the expectation of public that government will step in to correct decisions by municipalities. An amendment proposed in a couple of years ago, back in the early stages of the amendment process with respect to the acts, actually did, in theory, would have given government some kind of nuclear power, if you will, over municipalities. The associations objected to that, but I don't think we really objected to it. We kind of just wanted to see what would happen if they had that power. I don't think government actually wants that authority to begin with, and would probably, it would actually be quite fun to see what they would do with it. But in any case, it's not there, and I think overall that does kind of reflect the attitude of government to municipalities generally. So in place of that, I think what we're seeing, the court's role is being emphasized, and we're seeing a lot. We're seeing cases now ending up in court that, again, some people may have thought that government could have stepped in to, perhaps prevented those things from getting to court. A couple of examples in recent years, we have the Coal Bay conflict of interest case, and then, of course, a month or so ago, Buffalo Narrows ended up in court as well. And it was actually with respect to the latter, there was a comment in the media by the administrator of that community at the time, who basically said, we showed this to government, we showed our bylaw to government. In case you have no idea what I'm talking about, Buffalo Narrows essentially created their own election bylaw. And they showed it to government, and government, of course, said, well, you can't do this. They went ahead and did it anyway. And the administrator kind of said, well, why didn't government actually step in and stop us from doing that? And government is just not going to do that. The other case, the Coal Bay case, came out of an ombudsman's report that recommended the removal of an elected official before government could respond to that, it ended up in court, and essentially government was taken out of the picture. But the question in my mind is, would government have actually acted on that report anyway? And I really don't think they would have. So instead of that, government really stepping into those cases, we also have the expanded role of the ombudsman, who is kind of taken some of that oversight type function, but the ombudsman has no power. It can only make recommendations. To my knowledge, even though the legislation would allow a minister to take some action in response to an ombudsman's report, I'm not sure I'm actually aware of any actions being taken in response to a report. So my slides are jumping around a little bit. And now, of course, with the eligibility requirements, we have a new focus on compliance. Let me jump quickly to the funding piece. So Northern Revenue Sharing has been a huge success. It's more than doubled in the last 13 or 14 years. It has plateaued, even though I think it's at a record now. It has kind of jumped around a little bit in the last few years. And so I guess what we're thinking is that it's probably where it is now is probably where it's going to be. It's going to move up and down based on PST as a reflection of the larger pool. During the last review that Brad mentioned, it was kind of made clear to us that it's the revenue sharing, Northern Revenue Sharing is not an equalization fund. So I guess government doesn't have the attitude that it is about bringing the North up to the level of the Southern municipalities so much as simply meeting whatever, their perception of the Northern needs are. Even though I think there are some compelling arguments for increasing revenue sharing to a new kind of level, based on the fact that Northern municipalities tend to underspend in some key areas, recreation, culture, youth, and so on, as compared to the South. But these arguments, I guess, were not reflected in the new pool. So I do think that where we're at now is probably where we're going to be. I do think that rather than increasing the pool, government would be more interested in looking at redistributing amongst the pillars themselves. And again, it's another discussion probably going to happen in the next couple of years or so. Government, of course, provides capital funding through the Northern Capital Grants Program. It comes from the Northern Municipal Trust account that Brad mentioned. Again, fantastic program. The North only the North really has this. But a few years ago, the Northern Municipal Trust Account Management Board decided that they would put some compliance on that or some eligibility requirements, I should say, to compel compliance. So I think that led to the introduction of municipalities needing to have their financial statements relatively up to date, which it worked. It did. I mean, municipalities certainly responded to that, but it also didn't work because municipalities were also suddenly shut out of that funding program. So again, it comes back to that question: should that program or that funding mechanism have been about meeting the needs of the communities? In which case, they should have just gotten the money, regardless of whatever capacity issues they have expressed through their non-compliance. Or is it better in the long run that we have these things on there, and then perhaps in 20 or 30 years or whatever, they'll actually reach that bar? The other major funding program through government is in the North is the Northern Water and Sewer Program, which again is a spectacular success. It means that municipalities can get relatively decent water and sewer to their communities, and pay about 1/8 or 1/10 or 1/12 the cost of that. They also get to use their revenue sharing to pay it down. In the South, I believe municipalities need to basically come up with the money up front, and then they kind of get reimbursed for it. Whereas in the North, the NMTA and Saskwater sort of takes care of that. The downside of that, though, because there always is a downside, is that it tends to be an expression of government priorities again, I think. So, you wonder sometimes, because it does kind of lock municipalities out of accessing some of the federal funding. It all kind of goes into this one area. And so is it sort of robbing municipalities of some of their capacity to manage their own assets, to make decisions about where they would like capital funding to go, perhaps other places rather than water and sewer? But these are overall, though, it's a very good program, but I think there are always questions attached to those things as well. So let me just address the eligibility requirements. I guess Brad sort of mentioned that there's going to be no kind of hammer, which I suppose I was aware of. I haven't seen it written down. I guess Brad and I have spoken about that, but good to hear, I guess, that municipalities are not going to lose out on their funding in the North based on not meeting some of these requirements right away anyway. But my view of that, perhaps notwithstanding, it is a program that's more or less been designed to allow most of the southern municipalities to have no issues with. In the North, it's quite a different situation. About probably half will struggle in some way or other with those requirements. And I was a little bit surprised, actually, that government is continuing to move forward with that, given that there is this little pandemic going on. But we did, New North did argue for a staged introduction. It sounds like it's kind of happening, so that's good. But we'll see how that works out. Generally, I think we're all in favor of some kind of eligibility requirements. I think it's always been a situation of how those things are being introduced. So, we'll see how that goes, I guess. So let me just talk about some of the implications of what I consider to be a kind of hands-off approach. The funding stuff notwithstanding that I've just mentioned. I guess I'm referring more in a kind of regulatory or oversight. There are certainly advantages and disadvantages to that approach. But I think the communities need to understand the implications of government's role and how government sees their role, because if you understand what government will and won't do, then I think it does create space for you to move into. When I say you, I mean municipalities. I think that perhaps municipalities are not aware, or perhaps maybe don't quite have the capacity or willingness to take some responsibility for some of the things they think government should be doing. So, just to go through some of these dot points here, self-policing, what I would call self-policing, doesn't work if municipalities don't have their governance and administration sorted out. It's difficult for government to know when to step in when things go wrong. If you don't have a clear line in the sand, and I don't think there is a clear line in the sand, then we can kind of get some fuzzy policy responses. By far, I think northern municipalities, like most municipalities in Saskatchewan, handle their responsibilities pretty well. But there does seem to be an increasing sort of appetite or eagerness amongst the general public for municipalities to be more transparent and accountable. How that plays out, I think the eligibility requirements around revenue sharing is one of the ways government has responded to that so far, and I guess it's been a fairly soft response. But if you look at other jurisdictions, and you can probably tell I'm not from here, I'm from Australia, and in Australia, governments have tended to respond to that, public pressure. They've essentially overreacted, I think. There's one example where, because of municipal overspending, governments have decided to put caps on how much you can raise taxes by each year. A 2% cap on increases in in property taxes or whatever, is kind of mandatory in some places, and it puts huge amounts of pressure on municipalities to fund their operations. They start cutting, the planning departments or whatever, which is leading to all sorts of chaos. These are the kind of reactions that you sometimes see from government when they have been unsure about how they should be responding at a kind of a more of a granular level, if you like. If they kind of just leave the space there for municipalities or entities similar to that to operate in, and they see they're not doing perhaps what they would like, there can be a tendency to kind of overreact. I think given that scenario, I think it's up to municipalities then to, essentially do the right thing. I mean, I noticed, for example, my friend Jordan's community of L'Orange have introduced a new code of conduct, and they're looking at employing an integrity commissioner. I think that's a great idea. I think it's a model I think Saskatoon is trialing as well. These are the kind of things that municipalities can do to respond to some of that public pressure, and then that way governments don't need to move into that area if municipalities are already doing it. I also think, from time to time that when, if government does tend to sit back and just let sort of municipalities play things out, that, we hear a little bit too often that, well, they should be solving their own challenges, but is there a kind of a recognition of their capacity to solve their own challenges in that? And so, once that becomes a kind of a default position, it can be difficult to encourage government to kind of come in and so I'm just going to quickly move on here to the CODA. So basically what I was going to talk about to begin with was just the stuff that we are doing and government and the NMTA and our partners are doing to respond to the eligibility requirements and other pressure on capacity of municipalities. The pandemic has delayed a lot of this, hopefully not forever, but the Regional and Mort Administrative Support Program is one that we were intending to roll out about a year ago. It's now probably delayed until June. The NMTA has an administrative circuit rider program, hopefully coming up I think it's in the RFP stage. These two programs will essentially do the same thing. They'll provide extra support to administrators. The Northern Administrators Association was established, I think, in 2019. They continue to build their suite of programs, and then New North have a LGA bootcamp concept in the works that we would have been doing right now, again, the pandemic not being around. And of course, we also do training and governance initiatives, which are all put back into a full. Anyway, I've really rushed through that, but I'm pretty much done. Thank you.
Thank you both for sharing your knowledge with us. Get to hear some of the comments and some of the funding that's going to remain in place. One specifically the Municipal Economic Enhancement Program. So we're certainly looking forward to continuing with that and Northern Revenue Sharing. I think it's also important to mention that the capacity challenges that we have in the North, some of those are being looked at, such as the Municipal Management degree program that municipalities of Saskatchewan, in partnership with some key stakeholders in the North, one being, I guess both being government relations and New North and municipalities of Saskatchewan, and having that discussion. Actually, a proposal has gone into the Sask Polytech for a curriculum for a 4-year degree in municipal management. I think we'll open it up to some questions now. If people want to post them in the chat section. And I'm not sure, Sean McKenzie, I don't think we're going to be taking any questions live. So if you have any, I noticed there was a few in there already. I think Derek Larson asked where the Northern Administrative District or the North and South meet. I always say, I use this as a visual, north of the Prince Albert National Park and north of the Meadow Lake Provincial Park, and everything right across. So everything above that's considered the Northern Administrative District. I think Brad has answered that question, but if there's any more, I'll let Sean take over and look at that.
Hi, Gerald. There's currently nothing else in that box. And actually, unfortunately, we're running very close to the end of session right now, and we have to be done by 11:30 so everything can be swapped over for the government relations address. So at this point, we might just want to close out the session.
Okay, I just want to mention to our northern stakeholders that the position on the municipality of Saskatchewan for the northern director, we tried to have an election for this position, which I'm currently in, and I've been there for 16 months now, because of the resignation of Mayor Bobby Woods, who was the elected member on the municipality of Saskatchewan and director for the north. We're going to try and organize, we didn't have quorum in November, so we're going to try and have this sometime in the very near future. The northern municipalities that are members of municipalities of Saskatchewan will receive notice. So we'll try to ensure that we have significant time for people to respond and prepare for that meeting. And more information will be coming to that. So I thought it would be important to mention that. And of course, Mike Strachan, our VP for villages and northern municipalities, is certainly going to try and assist in specific areas as to what type of programs or projects we should come up to assist our northern municipalities. And we continue to try and build on some of the communication challenges we have, specifically working closer with New North and municipalities of Saskatchewan. So hopefully we can continue to move forward in progress. So as Sean stated, I guess we're running out of time here, folks. If there's certainly any questions, you can certainly send them on to me. Most of the municipalities have my email address and whatnot, or they can continue to forward to Brett and Matt themselves. So I just want to say thank you again to our sponsors, Canada Life and Marno Chappelle, and thank you all for joining us today. Remember, the presentations have been recorded and will be available for you for 30 days in the on-demand section of the convention platform. Next on our agenda is an address from the Minister of Government Relations. To go to that session, navigate back to the home page and hit the Join Now button on the schedule. So thank you very much, folks, and enjoy the rest of the convention.